Shalom, brothers and sisters. Welcome back to the channel. Welcome back to Trumpet's Call. I'm Maria. I pray that you're blessed today and that you're holding on to faith and holding on to hope. Thank you for joining me once again for another session of our Torah Tidbit. Today's Torah Tidbit encompasses scriptures from the Torah and from the Brit Hadashah. We're talking today about love, and I will entitle this little Torah Tidbit, Brotherly Love, a New Commandment. So let's get started. I will say that this lesson came about as a result of our last prayer. I'm not sure if I will have uploaded that prayer before I upload this video, but in our last sunrise prayer, or a new day prayer, depending on what we decide to call it, the Most High continued to speak to me regarding love and regarding loving the brethren. And so this lesson has come about as a result of that study, as a result of that instruction from the Father. So we'll get started reading in John chapter 13, verses 33 through 35. And it reads, Little children, yet a little while I am with you. Ye shall seek me, and as I said unto the Yahudim, whither I go, ye cannot come. So now I say to you, a new commandment I give unto you, that ye love one another, as I have loved you, that ye also love one another. By this shall all men know that ye are my disciples, if ye have love one to another. Okay, so as I was reading this verse of scripture, the question, of course, arose in my mind, Father, how is it that Messiah is able to add to the Torah? Because that's kind of what this is. He's adding to the Torah. How is it that he's able to add to the Torah when the Torah came from your mouth directly? And so I was, asking the Father about this, and then it hit me. I'm going to be doing some studies coming up on some foundational subjects such as salvation and our covenant, and I'm going to be doing some lessons on Messiah and who do men say that I am. There are so many revelations coming out about who Messiah is, who he's not, what's his name, what's not his name, that it's kind of confusing, I'm sure, to a lot of people, to a lot of us. I know it was for me. And I'm not saying that I'm 100% there, but I'm better than I was. I have a greater level of understanding than I did before, and I'm grateful to the Father for that. He's revealing truth to us in these last times. And so I'm going to be bringing forward some lessons. And so one of the things, just a little sneak peek, one of the things that I discovered about Messiah is what an important role he plays with regard to the covenant, not just being the mediator of the covenant, but by being the covenant. And I'm not going to say any more because I don't want to confuse you, but it is pretty brilliant once we uncover what the Most High has to teach us regarding our new covenant, renewed covenant. So with that said, this is related to that. And once that video comes out, you'll understand this even better than you probably will today. But under the provisos of the new covenant, there has to be a law. So when the Most High made a covenant with us in the wilderness, he said, okay, these are the agreements that you have to abide by. I'm going to do this, and this for you. I'm going to bless you. I'm going to make your name great. I'm going to bless you in the city and bless you in the field and bless your basket and bless your store. And there's all these blessings of Deuteronomy 28. So if you abide by my covenant, by my Torah, by my law, I will give you all of these blessings. If you don't, then all of these curses will come upon you, which is essentially the opposite of the blessings. And then the blessings would then go upon your enemies. Okay? So this right here, the Messiah is forming a new covenant. And with the new covenant, here's the law, the new commandment, the new law. And the new law is love one another as I have loved you. And so you think to yourself, okay, wait a minute. Does that mean that the Torah has been done away with? Not at all. What the Messiah did in forming the new law for the covenant is he took all of the laws, all the commandments, all the statutes, all the judgment, everything, and he summed them up. That's essentially what he did. He summed them up in this new commandment to love one another. And then you may say, well, what about the commandment to love the Most High? That's the premier covenant. What about that one? Did he sum that one up too in telling us to love one another? So let's go to Matthew chapter 22, and we're going to read about that commandment. And so we read beginning at verse 35. One of them, an expert in religious law, tried to trap him, Yahushua, with this question: Teacher, which is the most important commandment in the Torah of Moshe? Yahushua replied, You must love Yahuwah, your Elohim, with all your heart, all your soul, and all your mind. This is the first and greatest commandment. And then he goes on to say, brothers and sisters, a second is equally important. Now, hold up. This second commandment is equally important as loving the Most High with all your heart, with all your soul, and all your mind. This second part is equally important. Did you pick up on that? Meaning just as important. Love your neighbor as yourself. Love your neighbor as yourself. Who's my neighbor? Let's go back to John chapter 13, verse 33. A new commandment that I give you, verse 34, that ye love one another as I have loved you, that ye also love one another. By this shall all men know that ye are my disciples, if ye have love one toward another. So, from what I'm understanding here, the nation of Yasharal is being told, love one another. The whole nation, love one another. And when you love one another, the whole world will know that you belong to me, that you are connected to the Father, that you are Yahushua's disciples because of the love. So the question then is, how can you demonstrate love to the Father by loving the brethren? Well, I'm glad you asked, because there's an answer for that. Let's go to Torah. We're going to begin in Exodus chapter 20, starting at verse 1. And Yahuwah spake all these words, saying, I am Yahuwah thy Elohim, which have brought thee out of the land of Egypt, out of the house of bondage. Thou shalt have no other Elohim before me. Thou shalt not make unto thee any graven image, or any likeness of anything that is in heaven above, or that is in the earth beneath, or that is in the water under the earth. Thou shalt not bow down thyself to them, nor serve them. For I, Yahuwah, am a jealous Elohim, visiting the iniquity of the fathers upon the children unto the third and fourth generation of them that hate me. So to disobey the Father is to hate him. Okay? Verse 6. And shewing mercy unto thousands of them that love me and keep my commandments. Thou shalt not take the name of Yahuwah thy Elohim in vain, for Yahuwah will not hold him guiltless that taketh his name in vain. Remember the Sabbath day to keep it holy, to keep it set apart. 6 days shalt thou labor and do all thy work. But the seventh day is the Sabbath of Yahuwah thy Elohim. In it thou shalt not do any work, thou, nor thy servant, nor thy daughter, nor thy manservant, nor thy maidservant, nor thy cattle, nor thy stranger that is within thy gates. For in 6 days Yahuwah made heaven and earth, the sea and all that is in them, and rested the seventh day. Wherefore Yahuwah blessed the Sabbath day and hallowed it. We're going to pause right here. So these are the first 4 commandments. The first 4 commandments have to do directly with our relationship between ourselves as a nation and the Father. So these commandments are, you could say, they're vertical in nature. From our heart up to the Father. From our heart up to the Father. They're vertical in nature. Okay? So these 4 commandments have to do with our relationship to the Father directly. So you could say that loving the Father with all your heart, your mind, your soul, your strength is comprised or is demonstrated by keeping these 4 commandments. Okay? You could say that. Then that would be partially true. Okay? Because there's the other 6 that we have to deal with. So in these next 6 commandments, you'll see that these are horizontally directed. These have to do with our relationship with each other. They have to do with our relationship with the brethren, with the people who live within our gates, with the people who live in our communities and in our towns, within the nation of Yasharal. And that includes both native born and the strangers and Gentiles who may be living among our gates. Okay? This has to do with how we treat one another, those who live within the nation of Yasharal. So we'll continue at verse 12. Honor thy father and thy mother, that thy days may be long upon the land which Yahuwah thy Elohim giveth thee. Thou shalt not kill. That should really read murder. This was a mistranslation. That should read, thou shalt do no murder, because to kill is not against Torah. To murder is against Torah. To murder is to kill with hatred. So the father's saying, don't kill with hatred. When he sends the Israelites into battle and they kill their enemies, that's not murder because they're killing, but they're not killing with hatred. I just want to clarify that. Verse 14, thou shalt not commit adultery. Thou shalt not steal. Thou shalt not bear false witness against thy neighbor. Thou shalt not covet thy neighbor's house, nor shalt thou covet thy neighbor's wife, nor his manservant, nor his maidservant, nor his donkey, nor his ass, nor anything that is thy neighbor's. So this is Torah. This is the summary of Torah. Everything else beyond this in the first 5 books of Moses is a commentary or an additional statute or an additional judgment that's going to help brothers and sisters keep these 10 commandments, essentially, if you look at it that way. These are the main 10. Everything else is a corollary. It's telling you how to better do these 10, okay? The first 4 is about our relationship to the Father, and the remaining 6 has to do with our relationship to each other. Okay, so if you love the Father, you will keep the first 4. If you love the Father, you will keep the second 6. You can also demonstrate your love to the Father by only keeping the 6. Now, I know that sounds like heresy, but if you go back and you look at the commandments, if you look at the second 6, let's look at a few of them. So, the 5th commandment, honor thy father and thy mother, that thy days may be long upon the land which Yahuwah thy Elohim giveth. The only commandment that comes with a promise of long life if you obey it. Okay? So if you honor your father and mother, you will do whatever you can to be respectful and honoring to them. You will take care of them. You will love them. You will not speak harshly to them. You will not mistreat them. Okay? When you do that to your mother and your father, you're doing the same thing to the Father. Because the way we treat others, we're treating the Father the same way because the Father dwells in your mother and in your father. So whatever I do to you as my brethren, I'm doing to the Father. Okay? So let's move on to the 6th commandment. Thou shalt not kill or do any murder. If I murder you with hatred, meaning if from a motive of hatred I murder you, or if I have hatred against you in my heart, which is also a form of murder, I'm murdering or hating the Father, because the Father dwelleth in you and you've been made in the image of the Father. So when I love you, I'm loving the Father. If I commit adultery, then I'm committing adultery against the Father, not only my own body, but against the Father, because the Father dwelleth within me, and I am the temple of the Most High, and I'm using my temple to sin against Him. You see how these all fall in line? Stealing, it's the same thing. Bearing false witness, coveting. Everything that we do against our neighbor, we're doing against the Father, because the Father dwelleth in His community. He dwelleth within His nation and within its inhabitants. So to sin against your neighbor is to sin against the Father. I mean, literally. To mistreat your neighbor is to mistreat the Father. And the same goes for the nations. When the nations mistreat the Most High's people, it's as if they're mistreating the Father. He takes it very personally how His people are treated, so much so that the whole day of Yahuwah is all about the Most High taking vengeance upon the nations for how they have treated Him by how they've treated His people. Okay? So to love the brethren, to love one another, is the fulfillment of the law, of the Torah. I'm going to say that again. To love your neighbor as you love yourself, to love the brethren as Messiah has instructed us, is all of Torah. Okay? Because if you're loving your neighbor, if you're loving your fellow Hebrew brother and sister, and you're not doing wrong by them, you're not bearing false witness against them, you're not murdering them or hating them or coveting, you're being kind and respectful to them, you're treating them as you would treat the Father in terms of honor and respect. If you're doing that diligently, to your brothers and sisters, you're keeping the whole of the law, because it takes a special relationship with the Father. It takes a revelation from the Father. It takes a love for the Father in order for you to be able to treat your brother like that. You have to have had some sort of connection with the Father, some sort of revelation, some sort of blessing, some sort of grace that's been given to you from the Father in order for you to be able to treat your brethren with such love and such respect, and to be able to keep the commandments regarding them. So the fact that you're keeping commandments 5 through 10 successfully indicates that you have a relationship or a connection with the Father, because it's from that place of intimacy with the Father, it's from that place of enablement and empowerment from the Father that you're able to keep the 6. And so that's why I said to keep the 6 is to keep the first 4. So that's why Messiah summed them all up in saying, love one another. A new commandment I give you. Let's go back to John chapter 13, verse 33. Let's begin at verse 34. A new commandment I give unto you, that ye love one another as I have loved you. How has he loved us? He has loved us with the love of the Father. That ye also love one another. How? With the love of the Father. The same love that you have for the Father, love the brethren that way. Make it a love that is pure and undefiled. And then the world will know that we belong to the Father and that we belong to Messiah because of that love. But that's not it. That's not the only thing that happens as a result of that love. I believe the Father is telling us in this last hour that those who love the brethren in a way that he intended will be endued with power from on high. That there is an anointing coming, there's a power coming that's being released to those who are keeping the Most High's commandments. How do we know? How do you know when someone's keeping the commandments or not? Is it that they're wearing their seats every day? Is it that they use the correct phraseology? They call him Yahuwah and not God? Is it because they call the Messiah Yahusha and not Jesus? How do we know whether or not someone's keeping the commandments? This is the sign. The sign that we are keeping the Most High's commandment is demonstrated in how we treat one another. That's the sign. That's the sign to the world. The world looks. The Father looks. The sign is, look at how they're treating one another. They're in me. They're being respectful to one another. They're honoring one another. They're praying for one another. They're lifting each other up. They're sharing all things common with each other. They're loving one another, and in the process, they're loving me. These are my children. Let me bless them. Let me pour out my anointing upon them. Let me fulfill my promises to them. So remember, brothers and sisters, the Most High is looking for us to keep his commandments. He's looking for us to turn from our wickedness and keep his commandments. And how was that demonstrated? Love. Love is the sign. So I urge you today, in light of this message from the Most High, love one another. Love one another. Choose to forgive. Choose to turn the other cheek with regard to your brethren. Choose to not suffer harm or wrong or offense. Choose to not debate and discuss things that don't profit. Choose to not engage in endless genealogies, philosophies, and things of that nature. Choose to love the brethren. It's a choice. And then when you do, you'll recognize the love of the Father in your own heart, and you'll see that divine love that you have toward the Father as you share that love with the brethren. So this is the message for us today. Love one another. It's a sign. It's a sign of your spiritual maturity, and it's a sign of your relationship to the Father. It's also a sign if you hate the brethren. It's a sign of your spiritual immaturity, and it's a sign that perhaps you're not in the Father like you thought. Because remember, brothers and sisters, at this time, just merely being Hebrew is not enough to save us. We have to be set apart Hebrews, set apart children of Jacob. We have to keep the Most High's commandments. He's given us what we need. He's given us the power. He's given us his Ruach. He's given us everything we need to keep it. But what that means for us, especially at this time, is we have to choose to let go of offense. It's the number one thing that keeps us from loving one another, being offended. Oh, I didn't like what you said. I didn't like the way you said it. Oh, what you're trying to say. And all of that nonsense. It keeps us from the power of the Most High. Let it go. Let it be like water off of a duck's back. Let it go. Choose to let it go. Choose to be humble. We truly are a humble people. We are. We've taken on the ways of Babylon. But really, inherently, we are a humble people. We are. Let's allow the natural fragrance of who the Most High made us to be begin to come forth. Let's be a sweet-smelling savor in His nostrils. And let's be a sweet-smelling savor in each other's nostrils. Love the brethren. There's power in it. And when we come together, there's no stopping it. It's been purported that former director of the FBI, J. Edgar Hoover, said something to the effect of, the number one threat to national security is black unity. I believe he said Negro. Negro unity. Let that sink in for a minute, brothers and sisters. When we come together, there's a power unleashed that the world is afraid of. And it all comes together in us loving one another as the Most High intended. To love one another as He intended is to love Him as He intended. So the crux of this lesson is, to love your brother is to love the Father. And to love the Father is to love your brother. You can't divorce the two, for we are made in His image. So, may the Most High bless and keep you, brothers and sisters. May He make His face to shine upon you and be gracious unto you. May He lift up His countenance upon you and grant you peace. Peace, and then some more peace. I love you with the love of the Messiah. I love you because you are worthy of my love. Be blessed today and every day. Shalom and shalom.